What's up, everybody? Are you not satisfied 100% with your life as it is? Are there certain areas of your life where perhaps you'd like them to be better? Well, you are in luck because today's episode, we're talking about the traps of perfectionism. Perfectionism is the
Did it.
word
You got there.
I
It was close.
yeah. This is the Existential Stoic podcast, and we're not editing that because it would go against perfectionism. I'm
Yeah.
Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy? How's it going?
Oh, it's good. So I was thinking this week, like so many areas of my life. Not only am I not like content and satisfied where I am because they're not perfect yet, but also there's so many areas and things where I judge myself harshly, where maybe I don't do things that I want to do because they're not perfect. I'm not an expert yet. I haven't gotten it right completely. I might make a fool of myself. All these different things going on.
Yeah, perfectionism, it sucks because it really, I think, not only does it keep us from trying new things, I think, like quite often because we feel like we're not good enough to do it, or you feel like you're an imposter or something, it also, I think, it also traps us in that cycle of never getting things done, of finding excuses for ourselves, instead of actually doing the things we want to do because it's not good enough or it's not right yet. I mean, how many people have you met in your life that like wants to write or wants to do something but doesn't seem to ever get anything done because of that, right? They're too caught up in, it's got to be perfect. And the reality is like, anything we create, you can edit forever and make
Mhm.
different. I mean, you can always modify, right? So it's like, in a sense, nothing's ever going to be perfect, or there's always going to be new tools that come out that might cause you to, look at something differently or whatever. But yeah, I struggle with this too because I think it's one of the things that I really had to get over in order to really try new things honestly and realize that it's okay just to be bad at things at first because that's how you learn, and like, but that fear of failure, I think, is really connected to this that we pick up from like, school.
You make a great point. There was something that I was reading. Maybe it was the Art of Being a Badass or whatever that book was with the badass in the title. But you are
They
a
were doing
badass.
that for a while, right?
You
With
were
like,
dude.
oh,
Every book is F
fuck
star
it.
CK yourself and badass. But there, I think it was from that book where she was talking about how she was talking to her mom, and her mom was like, back in my day, you either were a mom or you weren't. There was no good mom or bad mom type of thing. And like we put all these, yeah, we put all these like moral judgments on everything that people do. And like, oh, it's so bad to
Oh,
be bad.
dude, it's gotten crazy though. Because like I think part of it too is like if people, you watch stuff online and everybody presents this perfect, like you want to get hints about decorating. So you watch somebody who does decorating online and their house is perfect. It looks like a museum. Or like when I got my puppy, I wanted to look up some stuff on raising dogs, and you look it up and it's like, oh, if you don't do this perfectly, you failed. Like you don't ever hit them. Don't only treats. They should be perfect. They should do exactly what you want at all times. It's like, well, they're also a puppy, so there's going to
Yeah.
be instances where that doesn't go well. Like,
Mm.
and it's just, but this idea that like if you're going to do something, you have to do it to this level, or why bother? And I think that's a really terrible way to look at the world, though, because it keeps us from doing so much that's like worthwhile, yeah, engaging, fulfilling, fun, and maybe like we don't have to be good at everything, to
Mm.
do it.
Yeah, I listened to this book talking about the unfuck yourself topics. I think it was called like
Fuck yourselves.
unfuck your health or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah,
But anyways,
one of them.
one of the things that I liked about it was she was saying, like you don't need to be 100%. Just aim for 80 and you're going to do fine. But
Yeah,
like so often we get caught up in the trap of 100%, like need to do it full throttle. Oh, or not doing it hard enough. 100%. What are you? Do
yeah.
120%. Like,
Well, it's funny though, dude. I mean, like, I don't know. I think I mentioned to you this before. Like, we're learning programming now, and like, in the past, I would never have applied for a job unless I thought I was like, ready in the sense of like perfect. But that's so unrealistic. And like you look at most people that get jobs, especially entry level, they don't know what they're doing. they learn there. That's the point. The company's investing in you, you know? And I think it's so easy to forget that. But if you think as a perfectionist, you'll never apply because you'll never be ready. There's always something, and I think it's also there's a sense in which it's also a crutch, you know? It's also a way to make yourself feel like you're making progress without ever actually making progress. You focus on, I mean, I don't know about you, but like when I get stuck in that perfectionist like mentality, you know, you focus on these little things that makes it seem like you're making superficial progress, but it's really none at all because you never get anything done. It's
Hmm.
always like, oh, I'm editing or I'm doing more research or I'm looking into this, right? You know, and it's like you never get anything finished.
Yeah, dude, I totally know it. Like, I remember when I was starting with building businesses, someone said bank on the bank. Because, like, you could spend, oh, you could be like, I'm researching to figure out how to do this thing. And it's like, is it making you any money? No. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, what's the deal?
Do something
Um,
else.
yeah, absolutely. Another thing I've been struggling with recently is perfectionism in relationships, around dealing with people, around relationships. So, like, for instance, and sometimes it's just with experiences in life, how I want them to feel good or to be a good experience or be the way that or turn out the way that I wanted it to, and it
Oh
doesn't. And then
yeah,
I
I
get like
got you.
really, yeah, like I'll have a great interaction with somebody, and then there'll just be this one thing that didn't go quite right. And I'll just focus on that and tear myself apart inside because of that. Everything else,
Yeah.
90% is fine. And then there's just this one little thing that's just they probably didn't even notice it and it doesn't even matter. But you know, yeah.
But it's there. But, you know, that's like the classic thing that happens to people too when they're like, you know, throwing a party or like getting married or something, and they want the day to be perfect or they want the event to be perfect, and they get so focused on that, right? You end up not enjoying yourself, you're stressed, you're miserable, even though probably everybody else has fun, you know. And well, most people, I think it's funny too, 'cause it's like we forget that we would allow certain little things to happen for most people and be like, it's just whatever, it happens. It's not a big deal. But for ourselves, we act like it's the end of the world, right? Like it's this huge problem. And, you know, we failed because that thing happened or whatever.
I love that you said that because that is so true. And that's why it's so essential to have close friends that you can talk with. Because like every time I have a problem and I talk with you or my brother or my friend Pooh or anyone else, like for to talk with a good friend that you have confidence with, they just see it and they solve the problem immediately. And like I've been
It's
struggling over
funny.
this for like a week. I've been tearing myself apart over this. And then 5 minutes, 10 minutes, problem solved. It's really not that big of a deal. And it's like, man, it's just so helpful to have good friends.
It is. Yeah, it is. It really is, though, because it reminds you, I think, that like, it's a good way to remind you of how to look at yourself and how to be compassionate with yourself, I think, because we naturally are with our friends, right? You know, and I think that's because we look at them as people, even though we don't look at ourselves as people,
Hmm.
pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's crazy though how much it's like I think if most people look at how perfectionism's affected their lives, if it has, it's you know undoubtedly negative. It always is, and it's like you know I can't tell you how much stress I've caused myself because of perfectionism. Like you know wanting things to be perfect, stressing about it, overworking when I didn't even need to because something's already done. I just haven't turned it in yet because and I think there's also a fear too. It's connected with a fear of failure, a fear of even success, a fear of moving on to the next level. You know, all of that comes with it, I think, because it's a way to protect yourself from that.
So, where do you think perfectionism comes from? You think it's something that's always been part of the human condition? You think that it's a part of like our Western fast-paced culture? Do you think it's a personal thing, like some it happens genetically, or maybe some people are just more prone to it than others?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. I kind of feel like it's definitely social because I feel like, you know, the emphasis on grades in school, the emphasis on like, you know, not just grades, but getting A's and like, you know, you got to be number one in your class. All of that I think just naturally breeds this fear of being second place or fear of not being good enough. When in reality, like the funny part about that is it's like you get in the world and it's totally different. That's not the case. You don't need to have the A's. You need to get it done and you need to get it done
Mhm.
first often. It doesn't have to be best. It just has to be completed. You know, you have to show the work. And it's funny too how like most things, like when you're in the real world, you just want to get something done and then you build on whatever you got done. It's not like it's going to be correct the first time. And like I think programming has actually helped me with that a lot too, because when you look at it like you want to get the structure of the thing done first, it's not going to be perfect. All the aesthetics won't be there, but you build them in after. You want a working thing first. And I that way of thinking has helped me a lot with it because it's like, oh yeah, of course the thing's not going to be done right away because you might change functionality, you might make a different decision. Like that's okay. You can build it in. It's not a big deal. And I think that
Mm.
that's actually helped a lot with it. Thinking that way
Yeah.
as like a as the progress, like the journey, not the end goal. But yeah, I think
Hmm.
I think to your point though, I think it's social. I think a lot of it must be, right? Like this idea of being the best and like winning. And this whole like culture of that we're competing with everyone else, so you have to be number one or you fail.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make a great point, and there's a couple of things, a couple of side notes that, but like you look at children, and they don't care. They're just doing whatever. They're having fun. They're helping other people, doing all that fun stuff. It's like the rare child who's a real perfectionist, and they're just like, somewhere on the
Yeah.
spectrum. But the other thing is, so I remember when I was a kid, my grandparents would give us like a little bit of money every time we got an A on a report card. If we got anything else, no, nothing. So like clearly you needed to be a perfectionist or else you just wouldn't get money.
Yeah.
And then also I remember when I got into vet school, I went into one of the very few vet schools that actually cared about like the interactions of the students. We spent the whole first week just like building up uh, relationships and friendships and doing all
Oh,
these
that's
activities
cool.
with our classmates. And they told us the first week, which is the only school that ever we were like the least competitive school ever, the most cooperative school, because they told us they're like, we have enough diplomas for all of you. You had to compete to get. They're like, you had to compete to get here because it's very hard to get into veterinary school. But guess what? We have diplomas for all of you, so you don't need to compete anymore. So like all the other vet schools, they were all cutthroat. Nobody would help anybody. But like our school, we were all just chilling, having fun. Yeah.
Do you know what's funny though that you mentioned that? Because like, dude, there's so many, like when I went to grad school, there's so many philosophy graduate programs that are cutthroat. Everybody's competing for, funding, they're competing for grant, they're competing for everything. And it breeds this toxic environment where, the people that are supposed to be your colleagues, you can't even talk to about ideas because you're afraid they're going to steal them. And it's like, how is that helpful? How does that make anybody better? When you have all these people around you who are interested in the same thing and ostensibly good enough to be there. So why wouldn't you use those resources? But instead we close off because we feel like we have to do it on our own. And that's part of it too. I think this feeling that you have to be good enough on your own. And that's a crappy feeling because the reality is you don't have, you can get help, you can ask for help, you can learn, you can still be in the process, but like this belief that we have to be perfect by ourselves is also, I think, where it comes from. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we live in a very toxic world in that sense, I think.
Dude, tell me about it.
It's funny though, because I think that's what kills me about it too, is like, dude, it's hard to shake it. Like when you grow up thinking these things, like I mean, I know myself, it's funny, like in the boot camp where like I got a question wrong on the quiz this week because I not because because I mentioned this, right? I typed
Yeah.
it incorrectly, but I added in something that like whatever, maybe it was but anyway, so I got the question wrong. And like part of me was like, duh, like mad, but then the other side of me was like, wait, it doesn't matter. I just need to get this grade. I don't really care. And it doesn't have to be
Uh-huh.
perfect. I was like, take a step back. But it's like that anger immediately, it's hard to get rid of it.
Oh
I
my
don't know.
gosh, yeah. Yeah, dude. I do the same thing. Like
I'm still
but
talking about it, so obviously it still bothers me.
struck a nerve. Yeah. Struck a nerve. Yeah, because actually when you said that, I was like, damn, you were right. Everybody else was wrong. Like,
Yeah, I was right. You gotta put the
yeah,
semicolon. It's JavaScript.
yeah,
Come on.
yeah. I mean, you were right. Everybody else was wrong. And yeah, but that's just the way that's just the way it falls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I think for anyone who is a perfectionist now or who may be struggling with it, I think really the only way to find out how true it is that perfectionism is a trap and it can be really rough for you is to start doing subpar work.
Yeah. And
Because
find out how much it's accepted.
and then you find, yeah, exactly. Yeah, start doing, like, the crazy shit is, or the crazy stuff is that like it's just getting stuff done. That's the important
Yeah,
thing. Like getting it done
yeah,
is so much more important than how perfect it is. And like granted, if you're working for like the FAA and you're trying to create a safe aircraft, okay, certain jobs you need to be a perfectionist. But for
yeah.
the most part, mm,
You're sending up the James Webb Space Telescope. You have one shot. Like it needs to work.
yeah,
But even
yeah.
that, they weren't sure it was going to, and they probably would have figured something out if it didn't. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
funny thing. Like, I think most people know we can fix things. It's not the end of the world. But you're totally right, though. It is funny. Like, I think you have to do some more work in a sense, at least to your standards. Because, like, I know, like, I struggled with it with writing for a long time, but then I started to actually look at other writing, and you start to see spelling errors, run-on sentences, and all kinds of stuff because people are just getting it out there, and the world's so fast-paced now that you don't, in most cases, you don't really have the time to spend on it like that. And I think perfectionism is also a trap too, because it also acts as if there is a point at which it would be perfect when it never is. Like I think that was the hardest thing for me
Ooh.
to kind of break too, was that belief that there was some imaginary perfect thing that I could make.
That's actually a very, very important point that you just struck on there. This idea that there is some perfect representation of anything.
Yeah,
Wasn't it like the
Plato's forms.
yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
where he was talking about the perfect circle and stuff like that. How really it's just a theoretical model. It doesn't actually
Yeah,
exist.
there's an idea, right? We might have an idea of perfection, but the reality is nothing in real life is gonna meet it's an ideal, right? It's like talking about like, it's like when we talk about like the good person, like look at Marcus Aurelius is such a good example that meditations we talked about a million times, but like it's a great example where he was a good person, he had good character, but he also shows that he wasn't perfect. He had to keep working on it. He had to keep reminding
Mhm.
himself about these little things because the reality is he's also a person. And nobody's perfectly good, just like nobody's
Mhm.
perfectly bad. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned earlier about like the with programming, how you're just trying to get something that works and you build on it again and again and again. I think that's really important to take a look at the world nowadays because I know for me when I got it started in like business and stuff like that, it seemed like it was very hard because like all these companies come out with things that are already perfect. And it's just like,
Yeah,
how
they're
can I
they're
compete
built.
with that? Yeah, how can I compete with that?
Yeah,
And it's like you forget that they've been working on this for years or decades or
yeah,
whatever. Like I mentioned that I'm reading Steve Jobs' biography, and back when he was messing around with computers before he created these amazing little iPhones and everything, guess what? A computer was like you had to buy the chip on your own, and then you had to solder it to a board and connect the
yeah.
wires, and then you had to go to a store and buy the different thing that you had to buy a separate monitor and like so like it's just like this idea that we think that things are perfect already. I'm sure that in 50 years or 100 years, if people haven't destroyed ourselves already, we're going to look back and be like, man, that was such an antiquated society. Like, what was wrong with them?
Oh yeah, dude. And it's funny too. Did you know I actually read that he was actually against the idea of making a phone at Apple. He
Huh.
was adamantly against it. Did you know that?
Wow, I did
Yeah.
not.
I guess like it took like a bunch of people had to convince him that it was a good idea. And like he was actually opposed to it. So like I mean, if you
Wow.
think of that, like if he had had his way, like they would never have made a phone, and yet their phone's like the dominant thing in the market. It's kind of
I,
funny.
I've yeah, I find it really funny that people like idolize him because in reading this biography, he either like when anybody says anything to him, he's either like you're a freaking idiot or he like praises you as the best idea ever and then he steals that idea.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah,
like
that's his own.
he's like this is the type of person that we praise. What a world do we live in?
Well, it's like I forget. I think it was Bill Burr said about him too. Like how he used to every time they had like one of those events where they showed their new products, he would walk out by himself and act like he did everything.
Right?
Like in sneakers and jeans, no big deal.
Yeah.
Like you totally like gloss over all the people that lost like time with their kids and stuff and were working 400
Yeah.
hours a week
That
to
he
make it so they
tortured.
turn the page. Yeah.
Yeah, right? That
Yeah,
he
but and
tortured.
that's the other thing too. Like you mentioned there too, which is a good point. Like if you look at businesses, like I mean, the iPhone's on what the 13th iteration, and yet they're still making new ones. So clearly, it's not perfect, right?
Yeah.
They have a
Yeah.
good and you look at like any company with a good product. You look at the time it takes to make that first the like to make the what do you call it, the prototype,
Prototype.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, you're usually talking about years. You're talking about a long investment of time and tons of people.
Hmm.
So, I think, and tons of ideas that got canned. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, I think when it's so easy when we're working on stuff on our own to get caught in this trap that like we should know everything. It should be right the first time. But the reality is like nothing is. Most things are a collaborative effort. Most things, they go out in the world and parts of it get rejected and you adjust them and you fix them. And like, I think technology is a great example because it is so easy to update things now with like software and stuff that it's a really nice example of that. Sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better when they make these updates, but like you see that it's a constant need for change. So obviously, like there was not, if it was perfect, we would never bother messing with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also another important aspect of this. I think it was Michelangelo or somebody who said that like things get better. It's not what you add to it that creates a perfect thing. It's what you actually take away. And I'm re-listening to this book, Goodbye Things, about minimalism, and he makes so many good points on it. He's like,
Yeah.
basically, humans are this, 50,000-year-old hardware, and yet we're responsible for doing more and more stuff all the time. And it's like,
Yeah.
no wonder we're constantly overloaded wherever we are. So it talks about just like removing as much, all the stuff that's not absolutely necessary, so that it doesn't overtask your entire system. And also it allows you, like, because I think coming from America, we get stuck in this idea that more is better. And if I'm not
Oh yeah.
happy now, I must be lacking something. It must be something more that I need in order to be happy. But that's just like a rabbit hole, because you can always go have
Yeah.
more and it doesn't do anything. But then if you go the opposite direction, you have less to be happy, then it's not what you it's not having what you want that makes you happy. It's wanting what you have.
Yeah, yeah. That is really like the key to happiness. It's funny you mentioned that because I remember when I was younger, like when I would think of the future, I was like, oh, I want a huge house and stuff. And like now, I do not want that. That to me sounds terrible because it's like, oh, more crap to clean. You know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
just space to fill with things that I don't really need or want. And it's
Hmm.
really funny when you look at how like your changes over time with that, like how like your ideas about what's good change when you think, I don't know, when you just start to think differently and on your own, really.
Because
There's
I,
something I
dude,
wanted to go ahead. No, go
oh,
ahead.
you'll think of it when I'm saying this.
Yeah.
Uh, I still get trapped in this all the time, because I look at these externals, like these external people, very good successes in business and stuff like that, people who've done very well financially, and I look at them and I get stuck in the trap that, oh, when I get as much money as they have, then I'll be happy. And
Yeah.
I keep getting caught in that trap. And he points out in that book that, like, he was caught in that same trap too, until he started getting rid of things and realizing that it's not the things, and like money is a thing. We accumulate more
Yeah.
and more because we
That's
think we
all it
have
is.
this thing and then we'll be happy. But it's not. I mean, it's a green piece of paper. And like,
Yeah.
so so
That's
like
all it is.
accumulating more can help you do stuff. But like, if you're able to live in an environment that costs you a couple $100s a month, like, why do you need so much more money? What's that going to do?
Yeah. What are you actually doing with it? I mean, you just made me think of it. So one thing I would recommend to people, because this was absolutely true for me, so maybe it'll be true for somebody else. I don't know. But if you start paying attention to where you get stuck with perfectionism, I noticed for me too, it was things I didn't really want to do. Like in hindsight, I realized it was like, you know what I mean? And this might sound weird because it's like, well, why did you want to do it perfectly if you didn't want to do it? But like I was dragging my feet and coming up with excuses because I think really like when I really asked myself honestly, like I didn't want to go on that path anymore. Like I wanted to change my careers, I wanted to change what I was doing, and I was unhappy doing it. And so perfectionism was a way to kind of like, I guess, mentally block myself from going deeper in a direction that I didn't really want to go. And I think once I asked myself that and faced it honestly, like things got a lot better because I changed what I was doing. But I think that was a hard thing to realize too, because it was like, all this time I have invested in something, I don't want to do it anymore. And realizing
Mhm.
it, like, yeah,
That's a great point, because I see that, especially when I have to write these papers for school. Like, I have this
it's
I there's so much resistance initially to writing the paper. I almost resist it for more time than it takes me to actually open up Word and write the paper. Like,
Yeah, yeah, dude, I know what you mean.
yeah. And it's
You
just
know,
because I'm just like, oh,
uh,
I don't want to have to do this. It's going to have to be so much work. And then I open up Word and literally I look up next and I'm done the paper.
that's what I found. So, it's funny because it was coming from academia, and it's like, this there's so much of it that it's funny. There's so much of it that I do. There's aspects of it I appreciate, but I feel like they've been like trampled on over the years anymore, and it's just not the same. And it's like so much of it just felt like empty gestures to me that it was like
Hmm.
I realized like
Yeah.
this isn't right for me. And I think realizing that's good though, because it's like, it is hard though. I'm sure you went through the same thing when you realized you didn't want to be a vet anymore. Like it sucks because it's like, oh, I put in all this time, effort, whatever.
Hmm.
But
Oh,
it's way better once you start doing what you want to do, you know.
yeah. That one wasn't so hard for me. I knew it. I knew it before I
Yeah.
even finished vet school, but I just realized I was in so much debt that I'm just screwed. I have to do this. Like
Yeah, you
there's
have
no
to do
other way
something.
out. There's no
Yeah.
other way out. So, yeah. Um, yeah. Another area, I'm not sure if this is perfectionism, but where I've been struggling recently is in like deciding what to do. Maybe I'm being a perfectionist about having decisions, but like sometimes I
Can you give an
there are
example?
something
Like like in what sense? Like day to day or like broadly or
sometimes day to day, like let's we'll just say this around relationships because I've been struggling with that
yeah.
recently. But
Okay,
like,
okay. Fair enough.
like thinking that like these people, I should just get them out of my life. And then I'm like, maybe not. I don't exactly know. They had a little bit, but then I'm like, no, I just shouldn't be doing this. Too much stress, all this stuff. I'm like, but I'll give them one more chance. And it's just like go back and forth. And then I beat myself up. I'm like, why can't I make a decision about this? What's wrong with me? Uh, Thinking that I should be able to make decisions great all the time. But like the thing is, when a decision is super
Right?
clear, there's no problem. So
No.
maybe it's not the time to make a decision because it's not super clear at this point.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, when it is clear there is an issue, you just make it and you move on. And it's like, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I will say this, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but with friends, like I have noticed that like all the people I really consider friends to, like I I feel like the friendship shouldn't be difficult, if that makes sense. Like I do think that's to me that's important. And like there should be understanding on both sides. Like I have friends who like, like good friends who, yeah, like they might flake out sometimes, and I know they might like in certain cases, but I don't get mad because I also know that's how they are, and they also respect that if I do on certain cases with this individual, right? So it's like knowing the relationship, knowing what I expect from it, and like, and I don't think it should be difficult, and I think that's important. But I think if it's hard, I think maybe there's something wrong.
Yeah,
If
dude,
that
that's like
helps.
that's dude. I know because that's what I was thinking of. I was like, why is it so much of a struggle with this all the time? And yeah, that was one of the biggest things. It's just like when it's right, and when it's not, it's not.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to admit, and sometimes you want to keep trying, but like, yeah, if it's really hard, I don't know. To
You
me,
think
it's
it'll
just,
change.
yeah,
You
yeah,
delude yourself into thinking it'll change.
you do. Yeah, it's funny.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, yeah.
we like
No,
constantly
that
trick
does make the
ourselves.
decision a little bit easier now.
Yeah,
I'm just like I'm literally just deceiving myself thinking they'll change. And it's just like
yeah,
what's
it's
wrong
not
with me?
going to though,
What's wrong with me?
because it's like, yeah, why bother? I don't know. To me, it's like if
Hmm.
which is not to say they should be easy, because sometimes it's hard. You got to help people, whatever, but it should be easy the interaction should be easy. I feel like it shouldn't be, work.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, well, it's kind of like I find myself like the trap that I get caught in is looking to others for like love, approval, appreciation, security, like those types of things. And it's like the
Yeah,
most deceiving trap ever because I think I can get that from somebody else. Not true, not at all true, but like
yeah,
I deceive myself into thinking I can get that from somebody else, and then they just hold it like at arm's reach. And it's
yeah.
like just outside, it's just outside of my reach. So it's just enough to keep me
Right
right
there.
there to that. Yeah.
Yeah, just enough to keep you coming back.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's tough. It is.
And every once in a while they let me get a little nibble. Fishing for
Well,
suckers. That's what it's
yeah,
called.
that's it. It's that. Yeah, it's
Oh
hard.
god.
No, it is, and it's hard too because there's always that. You know, relationships are difficult too because you don't. There's always there is that. that barrier between you and the other person where you can't know what they're thinking. So there's always that room for doubt, that room for questioning that makes it really hard too. Yeah, it does.
Hmm.
You know, I was thinking too though, this is on perfectionism a little bit.
Hmm.
I think back to that a little. I think,
Yeah, let's
one of the things
actually get
that
back to the topic we're talking
topic,
about.
right, back to who cares? It's whatever. It's not perfect. The
Yeah.
no, one thing I was thinking of too is, how much it keeps people from doing things that they enjoy because they're not great at it. And then it makes your world narrow. Like, because I think I mentioned this before, but like I had read one time that, like, most adult Americans don't have hobbies because people believe in their heads that if they're not making money from it or if they're not good enough to be the best, there's no point in doing it. And it's like you miss out on so many things though by thinking that way. So many experiences, so many enjoyable things. Like I love a lot of things that I'm not great at, and I'm not going to go compete or anything. But it would be dumb to take it out of my life because it's still something I enjoy, and it's like, and I think thinking of everything that way, like it's got to be something you can make money on. It's got to be something you can be the best at is really detrimental to our growth and development because it keeps us from trying things as well.
Yeah, dude, I totally get that because I paint these little miniatures for fun. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so many
You
times,
mentioned.
yeah, yeah, so many times, uh I will not paint them because I'm afraid that it won't turn out well. And it's like it's so counterintuitive because if it's paint. Like if it doesn't work
Yeah.
out right, you just paint over it. Like
Yeah.
but like
Or
I will
worse, the worst,
literally
get another one.
yeah, I will literally not paint for like days or weeks because I'm just like afraid that it'll turn out not well. I don't even try and have it turn out not well. I'm just afraid of what could happen.
No, I get that though, because there's been like it's funny. Like I mean, there's lots of stuff I do where like it's like photography. I know like most times, like if I'm gonna take a good photo, I gotta take a bunch because like usually you're gonna get a bunch of bad ones and some good, or like you need to like you have an idea of what you want to take a picture of, but you're not quite sure what the composition should be, so it takes a while. But there's been plenty of times where like I convince myself not to bother. I'm like, it's not good. Like it's like I talk myself out of it. Like, oh, I'm not gonna find anything good there. It's not gonna be worth it. But it's like I don't know until I go. And yet I know I would also enjoy doing it. So it's like I don't know why I even talk myself out of it. It's weird.
You make a great point there about just kind of doing it. It reminds me of something that I read in some book where they took a photography class and they divided the class in half. And half of the class had one assignment for the term. They just had to make a final photography piece, and that was what they were graded on. And then the other half of the class had like 25 or 50 different assignments over the course of the term. So they had to keep producing, keep taking pictures, keep producing. And they took a look at the end of the term, and the people who were significantly better were the ones who were just doing the whole entire term. They were taking pictures nonstop over and over and
Yeah.
over again, taking a ton of pictures, improving on them, getting better. And at the end, they had these great final pieces. The people who only had that one thing to do at the end, it sucked because they were just paralyzed the whole time, and then finally they took a picture and submitted it.
Well, it's funny, dude. It's that fallacy though, where you look at the final piece and you assume that that's like the first thing, right? And you know what's funny? Photography really actually helped me with that because like you look at a lot of these great photographs that people take, and like usually that's not the first. It's very lucky if that was the first one. And like I know from experience, like a lot of times, the great photos I've taken, the ones that I really love, if you look at my history and the pictures that I've saved, you'll find that there's probably about 75 shots of the same thing, trying to find the right angle and all, trying to get it right. And then you happen to get it right, or the lighting changes or something, and you get the right shot. But it's like a lot of times it's just trial and error, trying to piece it together and trying to get in your head what you see in your head to actually come out right on it. And I think it's kind of helpful because when you suck at something or when you're trying to be good at something, you realize how many errors it takes to get there. And it's like, oh, okay, that's not a bad
Yeah.
thing because you still get the good shot eventually.
That's a great point because I definitely don't realize that when I look at like I've looked at like these black and white photography books and
Oh, they're
every picture in
amazing.
there is just like
Yeah.
striking. I'm just like, man, and when I'm going around, I'm always looking like I never see anything like that. And it's like, how do they find that stuff?
Yeah, well, that's what's funny. Like, it makes you think like they'll have like 200 portraits and they're all amazing, and it's like they definitely didn't take that. It wasn't like click, click, click. That would have taken 20 minutes. When you look at like most of those projects are like a year or 3 years or five. So clearly they're taking a lot of photos if it's that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So
But
crazy.
I
So
think
yeah.
that's where, yeah, being bad at things is helpful because it teaches you that too. Letting yourself be
Hmm.
bad at things,
And then
not
you can
being
kind of
perfect.
work your way towards being perfect, which you'll never
Yeah.
get to,
Or
but you can
just
work your
being
way
good
towards
at
it. Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's just something that takes time. I mean, that's what I've been reminding myself to look forward to that because like I still struggle with stuff in life all the time. And I think like all of
Oh
life,
yeah,
you just
dude.
struggle with stuff. But I find
That's
that
all it
as I
is.
get older, I'm getting more skillful at struggling with it, you know?
Yeah, I'm
Like,
better at it.
yeah. Like when I was young, it was just a catastrophe, like a huge drama
Yeah.
about everything. And now there still is that catastrophe and the drama, but I'm able to handle it a little bit better.
No, I think you do get better at handling. I think the other thing too is it's like it's just like I don't know, at least the older I've gotten too, I realize that like you start to see that everybody else is kind of in the same position. And it's really easy to think that the things we're shown are true or accurate. Like, that like we talked about before, like, these people like they make a product and they get super lucky and they become, they act like it's like an overnight success, but it's really all the time that took beforehand to prep and skills and all of it. I think we don't see all the work. And when you start to see all the work and you start to become aware of it, you just see that like everybody's kind of in the same boat. No one's perfect. It's okay.
Dude.
We're all
Or
trying.
like I was listening to that book Dare last week or the week before, and they were talking about how in America there's 50 million prescriptions for some anti-anxiety medication. And
Jesus.
that's like 1 in 5 Americans.
That's
So like
nuts.
anywhere, yeah,
Yeah.
anywhere you go, guess what? If there's more than 6 people, somebody else is just as anxious as you are. And it's just like
Yeah.
that's freaking nuts, like out of
That's
this world.
crazy. Yeah, that's a
Hmm.
crazy number. That's
Yeah,
a lot of anxiety.
I know. So like
That shows you
if
how
you're
stressed we
struggling
are,
with,
though, about being perfect.
oh my
That's
gosh,
what it
yeah,
is, right? Like,
yeah,
that
yeah.
anxiety comes from, I think, most of the time. That's funny.
Dude, probably being trying to be perfect and do it perfectly. Yeah. So, what
Yeah.
do you think are? I guess we won't draw it out too long, but what do you think are some helpful ways to deal with perfectionism?
I think one, like I said before, though, start acknowledging it and listening to it and ask yourself if it's not an indication that maybe you need to change something. Because that is important. Like it might sometimes it's our bodies and our minds telling us in an indirect way, I think. You know, maybe it's something we are doing is not right for us. So maybe pay attention to it. But I think
Hmm.
also just like allow yourself to get back into like hobbies and stuff and to give your room to just do things that you aren't good at and it doesn't matter. And there's no stakes. Because I think sometimes just enjoying doing things can help eliminate perfectionism a bit because you start to realize like, oh, I can just do these things and just get better at it and just improve and just enjoy the process. It doesn't have to be about the end goal. And that helped me a lot at least. Start to
Yeah,
see like how it was affecting me in other parts of my life to my detriment.
yeah, yeah. I think also kind of helpful to move forward with perfectionism is like contemplate the worst case scenario, and then how could you
Yeah,
recover from that? Because a lot of
yeah,
times these like perfectionistic tendencies, I'll get trapped because I'm very scared of this outcome, but I don't clearly define what the outcome is. It's just this like
yeah.
calamity that happens to me if I try it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the opaque fear. Yeah,
So like actually like pencil and paper writing out what's this terrible thing that you're afraid of?
yeah,
What's the worst case
yeah.
scenario? And then if that accept that it could happen, and if it did happen, how would you recover from
Oh, also, I would say if your friend did this and like wasn't perfect, what would you say?
it?
And then maybe
Ooh.
turn that back on yourself.
Or your friend or a child.
Yeah, that's another good way to
Yeah,
look at it. Yeah,
like your
yeah,
own child. Because like uh if you can't handle it for when it happens to your child, like what kind of
yeah,
person are you to have a child? So like,
yeah.
and I
There
don't
you
mean
go.
that for anyone who has
That's a
children
good
out there.
litmus
I'm just
test.
I'm just saying I'm just saying that like if it's something that you're not able to help a child through, then like yeah, because we all are all just big children. Like I know
Yeah,
a
we
hunt
are.
for a fact. When I get tired, I get cranky. When I'm
Oh yeah,
hungry, I
dude.
get cranky. When I have to go to the bathroom, I get cranky. So like all this stuff, you
Yeah,
know?
we
Yeah.
are children.
Hmm.
And like, I think remind yourself that you can always add on to it later. I mean, I think that's the big, you can always change things. They don't ever have
Hmm.
to be, especially, if you're making it.
Yeah. That's it. That is a great point because I think it was like some TV show or something. Yeah, it was a commercial for some like animal TV show that was on, and they're like, "We've got one shot to do this," and it's like, I was like, right after they said that, the thought that ran through my mind is like, what in life do you actually only ever have one shot to do?
Yeah,
Like literally. Yeah,
nothing.
yeah, that's a
Nothing. You
great
have
point.
one shot.
That's
Yeah,
a
it's
great
good.
point.
I like that.
Yeah, you just try and try again. So
Yeah,
yeah,
keep trying. Yeah,
hmm I think
don't worry
that's
about
about
being
it.
bad.
And if you're a perfectionist, don't worry, you're in good company. There's a bunch of other people in the world who are too, whether they admit it or not.
Yeah,
And yeah, cool. So that's all for today's episode. The trap of perfectionism, and it is a big trap because the world kind of
yeah,
opens up once you are not so perfectionist minded.
yeah. It opens up like, oh, it's amazing. So much
Hmm
better. It
hmm
really does.
But don't take my word for it. I'm still learning as well. And I'm sure Danny is too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. So that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to check us out on YouTube and the podcasting services. We're here twice a week with action packed episodes.
episodes.
And we're coming up on our 200th episode in probably the next month. So,
Yeah,
yeah. So stay
exciting.
tuned for that. It should be out of this world. Anyways, this is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.